The spaceship was a whisper of silver against the moonlit sky. Inside, a girl with eyes like amethysts practiced her hypnotic gaze in the reflection of a deactivated control panel. Her name was Lyra, and her powers were formidable. With a mere glance, she could bend the will of others, making them see and believe whatever she desired. Lyra's mission was simple: gather funds for her ailing planet. Earth, with its strange paper currency, was ripe for the taking. A flicker of remorse crossed her mind, but she quickly dismissed it. The survival of her people depended on her success. A small blue planet filled the view screen. Lyra initiated the landing sequence, aiming for a place called England, a land her research indicated was teeming with the necessary resources. She would blend in, acquire the funds, and be gone before sunrise. Lyra's chosen method was elegant, non-violent, and ruthlessly efficient. She would target the wealthy, those who would not miss a few £1,000s. A simple suggestion, planted deep in their subconscious, and they would willingly hand over their cash, none the wiser. She practiced her technique on unsuspecting travelers. A businessman in an airport lounge suddenly found himself compelled to empty his wallet into Lyra's hands. A wealthy socialite, convinced she was making a generous donation, handed over her diamond earrings without a second thought. Lyra's confidence grew with each successful encounter. Her alien morality justified her actions. The needs of the many outweighed the needs of the few. She was a phantom, a whisper in the wind, leaving a trail of bewildered victims in her wake. The spaceship settled in a field of barley, the stalks parting gently around it. Lyra disguised herself as a human teenager, donning jeans, a sweatshirt, and a look of wide-eyed innocence. She ventured into the nearby village, Little Bampton, its quaint cottages and sleepy demeanour promising easy pickings. Her first target was Mr. Hawthorne, the pompous owner of the local grocery store. A few well-placed suggestions, and he was emptying his safe. Convinced he was paying for a lifetime supply of tinned peaches, Lyra pocketed the money, a smug grin playing on her lips. This was almost too easy. Lyra continued her spree, moving from shop to shop, her pockets growing heavier by the hour. The villagers, charmed by her apparent innocence, were none the wiser. Little Bampton, it seemed, was a gold mine disguised as a sleepy hamlet. Farmer Giles, however, was not a man easily fooled. He'd seen it all in his 70-odd years, from freak storms to prize-winning pumpkins. Something about the new girl in town, with her unnervingly still eyes and strangely accented English, set his teeth on edge. He'd witnessed her entering the pub, emerging moments later with a fistful of bills from a bewildered-looking landlord. Later, he saw Mrs. Peabody, who usually guarded her pennies like a hawk, practically forcing her antique teapot into the girl's hands. Something wasn't right. Farmer Giles, with the tenacity of a sheepdog herding a stray, decided to get to the bottom of it. He may have been a simple farmer, but he knew a con when he saw one. And this girl, with her ethereal beauty and unsettling gaze, was trouble with a capital T. Section 5. A plan hatched in the hayloft. Farmer Giles retreated to his hayloft, a sanctuary of weathered wood and the comforting scent of hay. He sat on an overturned bucket, stroking his chin thoughtfully. He couldn't prove anything, not yet. He needed evidence, something concrete to expose the girl's deception. Then it struck him. He'd use himself as bait, an old farmer pretending to be oblivious. He'd heard tales of hypnotism, of minds being controlled. But Giles had a trick up his sleeve, a secret weapon against such trickery, his thick-rimmed spectacles. He'd read somewhere that glass could disrupt hypnotic suggestions, that it acted as a shield against mental manipulation. It was a long shot, but it was all he had. He polished his spectacles until they gleamed, a spark of defiance igniting in his eyes. He was ready for her. Section 6. The confrontation at high noon. The next day, Farmer Giles positioned himself outside the village bakery, a fresh loaf tucked under his arm. He pretended to fumble with his change, dropping a few coins on the ground. Lyra, drawn to his apparent clumsiness, approached him, her eyes glowing with that familiar hypnotic intensity. "Don't worry, sir," she said, her voice like honeyed silk. "I'll help you with those." She leaned down, her gaze locking onto his. "You won't even remember dropping them." Farmer Giles met her gaze, his heart pounding in his chest. He felt a wave of dizziness wash over him, the world around him blurring at the edges, but through the distortion he clung onto a single point of clarity, the reflection of Lyra's astonished face in his spectacles. Section 7. The Power of Perception. Lyra's powers were failing, her hypnotic hold slipping away like sand through her fingers. It was impossible. She had always been in control, her abilities unmatched and unchallenged, but now something was different, something was wrong. Her abilities had never been challenged, let alone resisted, by a simple human. She had faced many adversaries, but none had ever withstood her influence. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. And yet here she was, staring into the unwavering gaze of an elderly farmer, his eyes magnified behind a pair of ludicrously thick spectacles. His calm demeanor was unnerving. Farmer Giles straightened up, his initial dizziness fading as quickly as it had come. He seemed to draw strength from the very earth beneath his feet. He looked down at Lyra, a knowing smile spreading across his weathered face. It was a smile that spoke of wisdom and experience, of battles fought and won. "Nice try, lass," he chuckled. His voice was steady, filled with a quiet confidence that made Lyra's heart race. "But I reckon those tricks won't work on old Giles." His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that Lyra couldn't ignore. Lyra stumbled back, her eyes wide with disbelief. How could this be happening? She had never encountered such resistance. The coins lay forgotten at her feet. They were supposed to be her tools, her instruments of control, now rendered useless. She had underestimated this seemingly simple farmer, this unassuming guardian of the land. His strength was not in physical prowess, but in his unyielding spirit. Her carefully constructed world of illusion was crumbling around her, shattered by a pair of spectacles and a healthy dose of skepticism. The power of perception had never been so clear. Section 8. Alien Justice. The villagers, alerted by the commotion, gathered around, their faces a mixture of confusion and concern. They'd never seen anything like this before, and whispers of fear and curiosity spread through the crowd. Farmer Giles, still clutching his loaf of bread, recounted Lyra's deception, his voice booming with righteous indignation. He spoke of trust broken and the betrayal that had shaken their small community to its core. He pointed to the bewildered-looking shopkeeper and the tearful Mrs. Peabody, their stolen possessions now evidence of Lyra's treachery. The crowd murmured in agreement, their anger and hurt palpable. Lyra, her alien facade crumbling, knew she had been defeated. The weight of her actions pressed heavily on her shoulders, and she could feel the judgment in every pair of eyes that stared at her. Shame washed over her, as potent as any earthly emotion. She had come to this village with a mission, but now all she felt was regret and sorrow for the pain she had caused. She had been wrong to deceive these people, to exploit their trust for her own ends. The realization hit her hard, and she knew she had to make amends no matter the cost. She removed her disguise, revealing her true form, a slender girl with lavender skin and eyes that shimmered like amethysts. The transformation was both beautiful and startling, a stark contrast to the human guise she had worn. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The villagers had never seen anything like it, and their shock was evident in their wide eyes and open mouths. Fear, mingled with curiosity, filled their eyes. They were torn between the instinct to flee and the desire to understand this strange being before them. Lyra raised her hands in a gesture of surrender. She knew that words alone might not be enough, but she had to try to explain herself. "I meant no harm," she said, her voice trembling slightly. The sincerity in her tone was unmistakable, and she hoped it would reach their hearts. "My people, they are in desperate need," she continued, her eyes pleading for understanding. She had to make them see the truth, the urgency of her mission. "I only wanted to help," she finished, her voice breaking with emotion. The weight of her words hung in the air, and the villagers stood in silence, processing the revelation before them. Section 9. A Starry Night Revelation. The villagers, their initial fear giving way to compassion, listened intently as Lyra explained her plight. She spoke of her distant home, a place where resources were scarce and survival was a daily struggle. Her journey to Earth was a desperate attempt to find what her people needed. Farmer Giles, ever the pragmatist, suggested a compromise. He proposed that instead of taking what she needed by force, Lyra could work with the villagers to find a solution that benefited everyone. Lyra would return the stolen goods, and in exchange the villagers would help her gather the resources she needed, legally and ethically. This way trust could be built, and both parties could learn from each other. And so, under the watchful gaze of 1,000,000 stars, the people of Littlebampton joined forces with the alien girl. They worked side by side, sharing knowledge and skills, creating a bond that transcended their differences. They pooled their resources, organized fundraisers, and even contacted the outside world, sharing Lyra's story and appealing for assistance. The village became a beacon of hope and unity, drawing attention from far and wide. Lyra, humbled by their kindness, used her advanced technology to help the village in return. She introduced new methods of farming, provided medical aid, and shared her knowledge of the stars. She healed their sick, improved their crops, and even repaired the church roof. Her presence brought about a transformation in the village, making it a better place for everyone. The alien girl who had arrived with the intention to deceive left, as a friend, a reminder that even amongst the stars, compassion and understanding could bridge the most extraordinary divides. Her departure was bittersweet, but the lessons she left behind would endure, lighting up the night sky with the promise of a brighter future.